For years, the American public has been victimized by the so-called cinematic geniuses, telling us time and again to see inferior movies, leaving us bitter and lost with no return. But no more! This travesty of justice cannot and will not continue, because we now have the Cinema Judge!
Hello and welcome to the Cinema Judge. For those regulars who regularly tune in to listen to me, thank you. From Carlson, Marie, and Bing, thank you so much for always being there and listening to me. I greatly appreciate it. For those new who haven't heard this show before, or the first time listener, the show is called the Cinema Judge. And first and foremost, it's a cable access show. So what I do is I make this cable access show, and then I just take away the video, and I just introduce the interviews in between, because obviously, without the video, you don't know necessarily who's speaking. So anyway, I've been doing the show for now 20 years as cable access, but suddenly this became super cool. It's no different than cable access, but suddenly it became hip. So I said, hey, okay, I'm in. So what we do here is we're basically one giant infomercial for a movie. We get interviews, scenes, B-roll, and all these things. And basically, it's just, we collect the evidence, me the judge, and I present it to you, the jury, and you make up your own mind if you want to see it or not. I don't generally go after actors or criticize people or insult them. If it's a movie, it's a movie. If you could do better, prove it, do it. But if not, just don't see the movie. So if you like it, great. If you don't, wonderful. I'm just here to present the evidence. Now, the movie approaching the bench today is called Irresistible. It's directed by Jon Stewart. Now, most people know him from, he hosted The Daily Show, I think, for 16 years. Just incredible talent, funny, smart. He knows what he's doing. He's very gifted. So when he stepped away from that, people were kind of shocked, like, wow, what are you doing? But I think it became more of a Groundhog's Day and, it wasn't much of a challenge, whatever his reasons were. And he's made a movie before this called Rosewater. This is his second movie which he wrote and directed. And most of you would know that he generally leaned more Democratic during his, what he talks about. But in this movie, which you'll hear later in the interviews, it's more about the mechanics of the whole politics thing, where both parties are going to be shown as, this is bad things you do, bad things you do. So it's not just a slam on one particular party. It is an equal opportunity. Both parties sometimes just swarm into a town, for lack of a better word, just rip it apart, tear it apart, and then they, boom, bogey out. So this movie's more about the whole mechanics of politics and how everybody uses everybody else, and nobody's perfect. So that's what this in a nutshell is. Try to get this guy elected as a mayor. In this movie, just stars tons of people that a lot of people mostly have heard of. Of course, Steve Carell obviously was in The Office for years, but he's also been in almost every kind of comedy since, from The 40-Year-Old Virgin, Despicable Me did the voice. He even did a TV show recently called The Morning Show. Also, he did one called Space Force. So he's everywhere. Also in this movie is Rose Byrne, Chris Cooper, and Topher Grace. This movie is just loaded with talent. So that's what Jon Stewart does. He brings in great talent to tell a story. So, first of all, this is what we have for you today. We have Jon Stewart himself talking about how he approached this film and how he really wanted to try to make it about everything or both sides and not just going after one particular group. So here's Jon Stewart talking about how he approached making this film.
I was thinking about, how do you satirize the current moment without necessarily being so specific? How do you think about it? Sort of in the difference of, how do you think about the weather versus how do you think about the climate? So I was trying to figure out, was there something about the climate of our current political system, the larger systems at play, and how those systems are incentivized that create the kinds of outcomes that we're finding, the sort of more corrupted outcomes. So rather than sort of focusing on, a Trump-like figure or a political figure that's taken off, you try and think about it from a systems perspective.
Coming up next, we have Steve Carell, who plays Gary, the guy who's trying to get this guy nominated for mayor. He's talking about how he thinks Jon Stewart addresses this film and what he brings to it.
This is what I like about how Jon wrote this. And obviously, Jon leans liberal. I mean, I don't think that's any surprise to anybody. But the way he wrote this film, it doesn't feel like a partisan movie to me. It feels very even-handed. Like there are pluses and minuses on both sides of what's going on politically in this film. And a lot of the minuses, a lot of the political garbage that people don't necessarily see or want to see.
Up next, we have Jon Stewart, the director of Irresistible, talking a little bit more about the process of him when he was writing about the money and the whole system.
It really is about the current system of where is the money? How is the money incentivized, whether it be for the media or for the political parties? What is it that's corrupting and polluting the kinds of discourse and outcomes and policies that might arise from that? And where does that money go, and how is it used for its own influence, and how does the system protect itself?
Coming up next, we have Steve Carell talking about how he feels it's important that this kind of material is being told by Jon Stewart because of his intelligence and all that he's involved in.
Jon Stewart is obviously a political animal. He knows so much, and he's so well versed and smart, and understands so much of the minutia concerning politics. So I think having something like this in his hands is really important. To have somebody with that background and that kind of knowledge is obviously is helpful when you get to the comedy, because he understands it on a much deeper level than I think a lot of people do.
Coming up next, we have Jon Stewart, the director, talking about how he wrote this for Steve Carell and how happy he was that he was, able to do it. Again, people say this a lot, and you hear directors, writers, producers say that they made something for somebody, and who knows? It might be lip service, it might not be true, but even if it isn't, oh, that's too bad. But you really truly hope, if that's the case, that's so wonderful, that when you write something, you're writing it for somebody, write that person in mind, and they agree to do it. So if these things are true, I find it just fantastic that they want somebody to do it, and that's who they kind of wrote it for. It wasn't just a generic, I'm writing this character, and we're going to find somebody, and we'll see if they could work. But they wrote it with them in mind. So this is Jon Stewart talking about that.
Steve was really the only, I really did write this for him and with him in mind. And so I'm very glad that he wanted to do it. Because it's a difficult character, because it's, what do you do with someone that who might believe in what they're doing ideologically, who might be very principled, but they live in a world that is less principled, and what does that do to them?
Coming up next, speaking of Steve Carell, we have him talking about his character.
I play Gary Zimmer. He is a Democratic political strategist. He lives in D.C. And one day he sees this viral video is brought to his attention that depicts this farmer out in the middle of nowhere in Wisconsin who stands up in this town meeting and expresses himself very eloquently and beautifully, and seems to really stand for so many of the values that, the party is looking for. So my character decides to travel to Wisconsin and convince this farmer, this really apolitical man, to run for the mayor of the town. And that's what sets everything in motion.
Coming up next, we have the director, Jon Stewart, talking about why he likes working with Steve Carell in all of his weapons that he brings to each project.
He's one of the few people that I've ever met who could play all those different notes, from the comedy to the more serious parts, but also you still, there's a certain sadness to his life. Like, his life is about trying to get money for these things that he believes in, and he pays a big price for that as well.
Coming up next, we have Mackenzie Davis. She plays Diana, the daughter of Jack Cooper, the guy that they're trying to run for mayor in this film. Now, you probably have, seen her from Station 11 miniseries, The Turning movie, Terminator Dark Fate, Tully, Blade Runner 2049, Halt and Catch Fire TV series. So in this next interview, she talks about what attracted her to this project.
I really liked the way it used a pretty conventional storytelling structure to unpack a lot of tropes about politics and romantic comedies and sort of small town mentalities. And I felt like everywhere you turned, he was sort of indicting the audience a little bit for assuming things would happen. Like, audience assumptions do a lot of work in this movie. And I just thought it was a really funny, smart way of telling this story.
Coming up next, we have Steve Carell talking about the character Mackenzie Davis plays, Diana, and how she's a bit of a challenge for him when he comes to town.
Mackenzie Davis plays Diana, who is the colonel's daughter. And she is, she's this young, incredibly smart, opinionated, and a sort of a foil for my character when I get to town, because I think my character has this idea that the small town folk aren't going to quite get all of the snazzy things that he does, and she gets it, and she is way ahead of him in a lot of sense.
Coming up next, speaking of Mackenzie Davis, we have her talking a little bit more about her character.
Diana is the daughter of Jack Hastings, which is the small town colonel that Gary, played by Steve Carell, has come to sort of encourage to be the next Democratic candidate for mayor in this very small town that's always had the exact same Republican, I guess, but like just a singular candidate for mayor. And she's just sort of watching her father and her town get overtaken by the ambitions of these people that have nothing to do with her town and really no enduring interest in the town. They're just sort of using it as a symbol for some greater race that they're trying to master.
Coming up next, we're going to have a scene with Mackenzie Davis, who plays Diana, the daughter of Jack Cooper, and Steve Carell. He's Gary, the guy who's trying to get her father to run for mayor in this small Wisconsin town. So in the scene, she's sitting down at the table, and Steve Carell's standing in the kitchen, trying to talk to her about how the process works, and how she's trying to say, just because one side starts going below the belt, we shouldn't either. We should go higher. So it's just one of those little conversations in how they try to manipulate people and trying to say, hey, we should do this, but we're doing this. So here's a scene from Irresistible.
We can't win unless it turns out that this town isn't the Mayberry everybody thinks it is.
We're the good guys, right?
Yeah, we're the good guys.
When they go low.
We go high.
Unless we also need to go low, apparently.
Only to keep those who would go lower out of power.
So when they go low, we go higher incrementally in relation to how low they went.
Regrettably, yes.
When they go low, we go almost as low, but we feel worse doing it.
That was a scene from Irresistible. Coming up next, we have Mackenzie Davis, who was in that scene with Steve Carell, talking a little bit more about this film.
This movie's really clever in the way that it shows how politics are so much about storytelling, which is an idea that I think we all sort of intuitively know, but maybe not the intricacies of it, and seeing how they position an enemy and a hero and what makes a person a hero and what they think the American public needs in this particular hero. I mean, it's really a reductive system, the way that they understand the electorate. And I guess out of necessity, because it's like a mathematical system, so they just create these boxes for people. But it's a very sort of dehumanizing form of storytelling.
Coming up next, we have Jon Stewart, the director of Irresistible, talking about working with Rose Byrne, who plays Faith, who's basically the challenger to Steve Carell. She's on the side from the Republican Party. They send her to fight against him because he's trying to get this person elected. So anyway, he's kind of she's not the villain, but she's just the adversary of Steve Carell. This is Jon Stewart talking about her.
Rose is you know, it's funny. She came in. We'd all been working for about 2 weeks when she was able to come in, and the first scene was her kind of marching back and forth in front of the camera, trying to make sure that she got the analytics people that Gary was going to get, and she wanted to make sure. And she goes, "Look, man, if he wants to take a stand in Turdsville, USA, then I say let's bury him here." She realizes that all the people from the town are in the office at the time, and she just turns. And I was like, if you could just turn and like maybe hit the mark at that moment, because we only had one camera on her, and just dead on, just go, "Not a turd, heart and soul of America." Keep walking, but like she just nails it like each time, and then did and added her own flourishes and all those things. I was like, oh, I'm dealing with an all-star.
Coming up next, we have Rose Byrne, who plays Faith Brewster. In this interview, she talks about her initial conversation with Jon Stewart when they were discussing this role.
My initial conversations with Jon were very exciting. I mean, he's obviously such a prolific figure in comedy and in politics. So to read this brilliant screenplay, such a smart satire, I immediately was intrigued, and we had a very long conversation about faith, my character, not religion, and America and politics as it stands right now, and his insight is just sort of unparalleled.
Coming up next, we have a scene that we're going to play for you from Irresistible. And in this scene, we have Rose Byrne and Steve Carell. They're being interviewed by some news, station. So they have the split screen going on, and they're interviewing her. So this really shows you how much each side could get under somebody else's skin. She's trying to say that she's from this town, which she truly isn't, and that really irritates Steve Carell's character. So he, of course, walks over to her to confront her about it. So anyway, here's a scene from Irresistible.
Democrat Party can't win. They're getting desperate. They don't know us. They don't want to know us. And they look down on our values.
No, that's we. You're DC elite.
Oh, no, actually, I'm from here.
Faith, I didn't know that. You're from Wisconsin?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, no, Deer Lake, I'm from Deer Lake.
What?
Oh,
whoa.
Wow, so this campaign has been a bit of a homecoming.
It really is, Brooke. Thank you.
No. That's a lie. That's a lie.
No,
you're lying. She's lying. That's what are you even doing?
Well, that's always a great and spirited discussion. Thank you. But unfortunately, we'll have to leave it there.
Coming up next, we have Rose Byrne talking about how much she enjoys working with Steve Carell.
It's so fun sparring with Steve. I mean, he's so quick. He's so generous, and nothing can surprise him or shock him. So it's a delight to try to get a reaction. And he has a great rapport with Jon, and it's been really, truly so fun to be able to have scenes with him.
Now, coming up next, this is one of my favorite kind of interviews, when somebody's just honest about how they feel about when they first meet somebody that they respect, or they've seen their movies but they've never met, and they sometimes play intense characters. So when they first meet them, even though they're a superstar themselves, they get starstruck or nervous or not knowing necessarily what to do or how to act. And again, maybe it's all smoke and mirrors, but even if it is true, it's really fun to hear. So here's Steve Carell talks about working with Chris Cooper. Now, Chris Cooper, he's been in just tons of films that people know him from. He's been in The Patriot, American Beauty, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, the Homecoming series. He can be very intense, and when he just looks at you, he has that whole kind of role dialed in. So for him to do this kind of role, even though he's still a strong character, he's not a mean, or lack of a better word, bad guy. So having him play almost off character, but still a strong character, is really, really cool for them to do. So here he is, Steve Carell, talking about meeting Chris Cooper.
I was terrified of Chris Cooper before I met him, because I thought, this is someone who would just kill you with a death stare. He's he's so intense, or at least that's, you see him in films and that's the sense you get from him. Like, do I look at him in the eye? I mean, that's the kind of person I was worried he would be. Because he's such a good actor and he's so riveting and he does a lot without doing much at all. He's incredibly calibrated and intuitive. But then you meet him and there's obviously, like happens so often, he's the nicest guy and really warm and sweet and cares deeply about what he's doing.
That was Steve Carell talking about Chris Cooper. Up next, we have him talking about his character, Jack Hastings.
He's a retired colonel in the Marine Corps. He's real honest, disciplined, and he's a man of great character. And I think that just kind of comes through who Chris Cooper is. He feels like he's that same sort of person, at his base. He's just a good, solid human being.
Coming up next, we have Jon Stewart also talking about Chris Cooper and how he felt he was perfect for this role.
That character is just all about integrity. And that's the way I always viewed Chris. He's just one of those guys that he does great work, and then he goes and he lives where he wants to live, and he doesn't play the game. And he's had a background in Texas and in farming, and he just, I wanted somebody that had a little bit of this in their being, in their DNA. And I felt like he was a great person to have that, forgetting about just as a great actor, but he was able to bring a firmness to it.
Coming up next, we have the director of this film, Jon Stewart, talking about what I kind of mentioned earlier in the show about why he got out of doing what he was doing compared to this. Yes, that was rewarding, but you always knew, okay, that episode wasn't very good, so what I'm going to do, I can just do better next time. But in this kind of environment, when you're making a film, it's all, you have to fix it on the spot. It is, once it's done, it's done. It's in the can. There's no going back, and it's forever. So I really enjoy his getting in his head, analyzing what makes filmmaking more enjoyable or different from his daily topic kind of show. So here he is talking about the whole process of making films.
I really love this process. Having come from sort of topical and daily television, which was really fun and challenging in its own way, but forgiving in the sense that, okay, Monday's show kind of sucked, but Tuesday will be fine, or Wednesday, and it just keeps going. And in some ways, this is a more emotional process because you work on something for such a long time before it's realized. And then as it's being realized, you bring in people like Grace Yoon and Alex Bovard and Bobby Bukowski, and they elevate what you had written through production design and costume and cinematography. And watching that happen after spending so much time with it just kind of alone is a really, it's emotional. It's kind of invigorating, like all this time, and you just have these 30 days to get it all done, and watching everybody come together and the actors and the set and all those things, elevating it it's very exciting.
Coming up next, we have Mackenzie Davis talking about how much she enjoys working with Jon Stewart.
Jon Stewart is one of the loveliest people I've ever worked with. He has such an attention to performance, which is remarkably rare in directors, for them not to just be paying attention to the frame and the lighting and creating a beautiful image, but he is like hypersensitive to every single beat of performance, which makes the process of making the movie, not just the finished product, but like the day-to-day life on set, so engaged and active, and you feel so sort of challenged, and it really creates such a nice environment having somebody who's paying such close attention to what you're doing and giving you new ideas every single take. It's really so fun.
Coming up next, we have Steve Carell talking about how much he enjoys working with Jon Stewart, and so does everybody else on the cast and on the set.
Every member of the crew has mentioned, that I've talked to, has mentioned what an anomaly he is as a director. He makes everybody, I mean, apart from all the creative stuff, just as a human being, he makes everybody feel welcome and a part of what they're doing, and like an equal partner. And it's not just lip service. He's really kind to people, and he really offers himself up. You know, he talks to everybody. He includes everybody in on whatever process is going on. And I think people appreciate that. When you feel like you're a part of the creation of something, and an equal, you know, an equal partner, I think that's important.
We hope you enjoyed our in-depth look at Irresistible, written by Jon Stewart and directed by him, and stars Steve Carell. Now, if you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, ways to improve this show, please feel free, drop me a line. Let me know what you would like to see more of or less of. I'm here to listen. I just want to make the show a better show. And seriously, I want to thank everybody around the world who've listened to this show. From India, Vietnam, France, Mexico, Nigeria, Ukraine, United Kingdom, Mongolia, South Africa, Ireland, Italy, Germany, Australia, Russia, Greece. I mean, seriously, I can't even tell you how honored I am to have everybody listening, not to mention the people in the States. I mean, of course, you know, from the Midwest, Wisconsin, Minnesota, but we have people from New Mexico, New York, Oregon, from Colorado, New Jersey, Boston, Virginia. Truly, I am very, very honored that you take your time to listen to this show. With all the shows to watch out there in the world, you could listen to anything. But thank you for sparing a few moments in all the different devices that people listen to the show on. I really enjoy hearing about that, from your Apple Watch to, you know, Alexa to everything else. So thank you for tuning in and listening. So until next time, I'm Jeff. Thanks for listening to The Cinema Judge.